ain't finna cap. I became very nonchalant. But this is what y'all wanted, right? To me not give a fuck? Well, congratulations. Now, I really don't give a fuck. What are you talking about?
The Sockjig Sneaker Podcast is not a reply guy. Welcome to episode 47 of the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. I am your host, Sockjig. You can follow me on Twitter at Sockjig and on Instagram as well. So we're finally back after kind of a long break. I had kind of warned in the last episode that I was going to focus on Twitter a bit with some of the bracket stuff that I was doing, the best sneakers of the year bracket. And then I also did my worst of the year list at the very last day of the year. And both were really well received. Thank you everyone who liked and voted and retweeted and all that kind of stuff. I was kind of worried about oversaturation a bit. Plus it was the holidays. And so I just spent the time watching football or actually going outside. Just kidding, I didn't go outside. Also wanted to say thank you to everyone who bought the golden yellow socks from the last podcast episode. The golden yellow ones were really inspired by a pair of yellow socks that I have from Carpet Company, the skate brand from Baltimore. So I wanted to pay an homage to that, but you know, going with golden, yellow, and red, I can't exactly beat the DHL allegations. So either way, the socks are really well received. People seem to like the ribbed version, and more of that coming soon. There's no socks in this episode, but maybe the next one I will have some ready. In terms of topics, it's jam-packed today. I talk about some podcast goals that I have for the upcoming year, kind of a reflection. I also talk a little bit about feedback I got from the last episode. I also do some year-end stuff. I talk about some of the results from that Sneaker of the Year bracket that I did and some of my favorites of the year as well. Some other topics, I talk about selling mystery boxes to kids, and I'll give you my take on that. I also talk about Knockoff Brands, a topic that comes up every 3-4 months it seems. About Nike making slides that look like Yeezys, John Geiger making slides that look like Yeezy slides, and the Somewhere in America dude. I also give my thoughts on Shopify moving to Supreme. I talk about round 2 closing down and how they had basically pioneered the consignment shop formula that others are now using. And finally, I talk about how there's no easy way to make content about sneaker history these days. And this all came from a Sneakers app poll that they did, some bracket thing with Air Force Ones, and a bunch of Grail Air Force Ones lost to newer Air Force Ones, and people were upset about it. But first, on feet, pickups, skips, and I also talk about some upcoming releases. On feet lately, I've been wearing the SB Habibi Dunks. Those are really great in hand. The quality is awesome on them. Excellent shoe. Probably one of the best SBs in the last 5-6 years. In terms of pickups, from the last episode, which I did like almost a month ago, I did pick up the Orange Lobster SB Dunks. I got the special box. I basically got a VIP invoice before the release, and at the recording of the last episode, they hadn't shipped at the time, so I didn't want to jinx it and I didn't mention it. So that is why. And for the Orange Lobster release, last episode I talked about the botch release, and it seems that they basically canceled all those bot orders instead of shipping them all. So, you know, when I was saying that maybe they didn't want to take the hit, maybe stock was low, or maybe they decided they got to take the hit. It seems like they even canceled raffle winners because the raffle didn't go off that well either, but the people who did win also got canceled. But I also saw later that they started sending invoices to random customers that have been still going out. So I follow a lot of people on Twitter who got an invoice, who were lucky enough to get an invoice. But I do also follow lots who did not. Other pickups, I picked up the Travis Phantom one, assist to Team Travis and the plug on that one. Travis Scott, as I've mentioned before, a huge fan of the podcast. Those are much nicer in hand than I expected. I've been making jokes that it's a ref shoe, but if you've seen a Travis 1 in hand, you know the black material has a certain nubuck or whatever it is, has a certain feel to it. And this Phantom basically has that and kind of a suede on it all over. And so it is much nicer in hand. I don't think it should be a $700 shoe, but price is determined by stock numbers and demand. And so stock numbers are low, demand is still high because Travis. I picked up like a GR version of A6 Gel Keanu 14, one of my favorite models of late. I picked those up on a Boxing Day sale for like $35. Can't go wrong with that. I also picked up the Vomero 5 oatmeal colorway, the first one that dropped. This is only the second women's shoe I've ever bought. First one being the Ama Manir 3. I basically followed the unwritten rules of men buying a women's shoe. I found them on a site in size 13.5, and they were just sitting. I waited a few days, they were still sitting, and then I finally was like, yeah, I'm going to buy these. And so I can't be canceled. I followed the unwritten rules. I also picked up the Rick Owens Converse, the Turbo Weapons, the new ones that came out. Converse Weapons are probably the first sneaker that I ever really liked when I was a kid. The last pair, the all black pair, I sold those a while back. I took like a $385 bid for those. So I got them back. And these ones are a little bit nicer because it's not all black. It's got hints of white or cream in it as well. In terms of skips, January is a slow month. It's not exactly a great sneaker month. People are in save mode, so it's understandable to skip most sneakers that release this month. I skipped out on the Jordan 2 OG Chicago. I thought about it and even carted at one point and then just dumped the cart. But now I kind of regret it. I probably should have copped, but I know that if I did, it would probably just sit in a pile here and I'd never get to it because it is a high. I also skipped out on the True Blue Jordan 1s. I've been trying to tell myself not to buy every single Jordan 1 anymore. And this shoe actually triggered a lot of takes on the status of sneakers. For some people, it's a return to the glory days of easy cops. And for other people, it's a sign the sneakers are dead. So pick your side, post your hot take, whichever one you want. They're both available on this shoe. Also skipped on the Montreal Bagel Dunk that came out. Not exactly a shoe for me. I don't really have any desire to wear food on my feet, but I really do appreciate this kind of release where it was region specific, an ode to Montreal, and they even had a Canada only special box, and every Canadian retailer had them early. Stores across Canada had all these activations and people turned out and were lining up, and they had drone shots of people lined up in the snow and everything. So more of this kind of stuff, more in other regions, probably exactly what Nike wanted. They wanted those shots of people in line, people showing up and showing out. So even though the shoe's not for me, more of this stuff, please. A few notes on some upcoming releases. I wanted to talk briefly about the Ja Morant one that was announced. I feel like people are judging that shoe a little too early. I think it's got a lot of potential, a lot of fire colorway potential. I can just imagine it in, a bread colorway or certain neon colorways. I think it'll look great. I think it's really cheap too, like $110, $120. So it'll fill the gap left by Kyrie. And, every week Ja Morant has an amazing dunk. So those dunks will sell the shoe. But I also wanted to do a callback to a point I made on a previous episode is, who is the designer of the sneaker? It wasn't in the press release, wasn't in any mentions in the interviews from Ja Morant that I saw. I even asked Nick DePaula on Twitter and he did not reply. Maybe he didn't know, maybe he didn't see the tweet. I don't know. I'm not sure if he was an official partner in the rollout or first to tweet it or got a heads up that the press release is going out. So I don't know. Maybe he didn't think to ask, or maybe he was instructed not to talk about it. But as I had said in that previous episode, Nike not naming designers by name anymore is very interesting to me. Like, why would they not name the lead designer? Like, what is the point of not giving credit to someone who was creative and created a new silhouette? Everyone loves credit. Or, was it designed by a committee? That's why. But if one person was the lead, they don't want them to get a big head about it. They don't want them to get poached. I'm sure people who work in Portland on both sides of the river know who worked on it. And maybe it will come out when the real release happens. But for now, it's still a mystery. I don't know who worked on it. But usually what happens is the person who worked on it talks about it on their personal IG stories, and that's it. And those are gone in 24 hours. Also upcoming is the Union AJKO Low. There's both a canvas and a leather one. Canvas is just so hard to keep clean. You get one little smudge on there and it's just impossible to clean versus a leather one. So maybe that's why they made both. It's interesting these are releasing in January, but I assume everything's been pushed back. When you have a schedule of what sneaker is releasing when with shipping issues and all that kind of stuff, the only way to course correct is either keep pushing everything down the line or have a year where you have 3-4 drops when you normally would have had 2. But the risk with that is oversaturation. And I'm not sure if Union has gotten there yet, and maybe they will with these two sneakers, this one and the upcoming high that has been rumored as well too. But if these were conceived almost 2 years ago, I'm assuming stock is high because sneaker releases at the time, Union was at a high. It made sense to make a ton. So I'm assuming these are going to come out. There's probably a lot of stock. It might be an easy cop. But with Union and raffles and shipping and all that kind of stuff, I don't know how it's exactly going to go. Some people were saying, hey, why didn't you have Union shipping issues on the worst of the year list? And I definitely had it on the missed the cut list, and I just kind of left it off. So also rumored is a Jordan 1 high that is woven and seems to be inspired by the Nike Footscape. You know, what's interesting about this one is people have obviously seen it, but the shoe has not leaked yet. And it's very interesting why it hasn't leaked yet. And I'm assuming it hasn't leaked yet because it is terrible. And from word I heard is people think it's going to be received poorly. So that is why I think it hasn't leaked yet. Maybe they want to, release the AJKO first, have its run. And once those sell out, then it can be leaked. I don't know. I saw on Twitter, Mr. Unloved Ones was asking Oldheads sales if it's time to leak yet. And he replied that he's just waiting for the text back. So that exchange gives a lot of insight in how leaks happen. I made a joke that, I imagine just the Chukka rainbow Footscape woven on top of a Jordan 1. And this guy, one of my followers, T something, made a mock-up of it. I didn't make a mock-up of it because I was watching NFL playoffs and I didn't want to get off the couch. Kind of a hands-off Photoshop guy. But when he posted it, people replied, the private selection guy replied, and Mr. Unloved Ones replied that basically said it's pretty close to what the real one looks like. So it's going to be very interesting when that drops. I think people will probably hate it, but I know Nike Footscape Woven has its share of fans as well, so maybe it'll become like a mood board shoe. I wanted to talk about some podcast goals for the upcoming year, but first off, before that, I wanted to talk about some of the feedback I got on the last episode. I got a lot of nice feedback from a lot of people who listened. People were very supportive of me. Even sneaker media people reached out and were very supportive. I didn't hear anything from Complex. I didn't really expect to, nor did I really want to. And I know one of them is the type to hear everything said about them and whine about it behind the scenes. What I wanted to say is I don't plan on a protracted war with Complex. What I didn't say in the last episode is the guy had also said, fuck that guy about me. And so I'm just here like 50 Cent saying, what did he say fuck me for? And so I felt the need to respond. And as I said before, anyone who wants to go war with me usually doesn't end well for them. And it's also usually been someone who I've previously helped, not someone who's helped me. If any of this sneaker beef stuff comes across as cringe to you, I am sorry. I apologize. Not everything I do is going to be right for everyone. Like I said, I'm just trying to defend myself because in this day and age, if you don't set the record straight, it just becomes kind of the accepted truth. I don't think they were out there really trying to badmouth me, but they could have. At least now I can always say, hey, listen to my side on this episode. It's on the historical podcast record. But I know people like them and their content. Their content is very adequate. It's very, mezzanine level commentary on sneakers. I'm not trying to sway people to dislike them. They're just too popular for that. I'm not going to change anyone's mind. They have their lane, I have mine. An example of this is there's this tweet about the MMW guy wearing a distressed Air Force One. And I quote tweeted it and I said, Nike needs new collaborators, which is something I brought up in an episode previously as well too, that some of these collaborators like Ambush and MMW are a little stale at this point. But what I wanted to say is my lane is I can easily say that. I can say Nike needs new collaborators. I'm not sure any of them can or would even try. I have that freedom in this lane. They don't in their lane. In their lane, but they're not going to bite the hand that feeds. Otherwise, how do we know the 2023 ACG schedule and shit like that they leak? It's just a huge difference in two different lanes. So they don't need to be worried about me and I won't be worried about them. Because what happens is hating backfires at a certain point. If I'm out here just shitting on them nonstop for any minor thing they do, it makes me look bad as if I can't get over it. And makes me look like I'm not mature enough to get over it and move on. Hating and this quest for revenge basically changes you, and not for the better. And I think that was the entire point of the book, The Count of Monte Cristo. And it already did with me taking personal shots about their height or whatever. That's not something I do. I don't take personal shots of anyone ever. But the dude also did not need to say fuck that guy about me. So hating is not going to become my entire personality on here. I'm not going to let it change me. I'm going to let it go. Why would I waste my personality on some wieners? As far as I'm concerned, I ended it. I dunked on them for 15 minutes straight. Nothing that I said could be refuted. The mic was dropped. I was thinking of a scenario that, say I made a mistake or a fuck up and I'm the main character of the day. I'm sure on that occasion, haters will come out and start shitting on me. And I kind of expect that at this point. So say I said, there's no more Travis SBs. That product line is over. And then the next day, Travis announces a new SB. I would get shit on. And say Nice Kicks post a meme about it on their IG. If they do, I'm going to just accept it because I fucked up. I'm not going to be a little bitch about it and complain to Matt Halfhill. Because I know, as Adizes Nice says, Twitter comes for everyone eventually. If that happens where I fuck up, I just hope the jokes or memes about it are funny. I will own up to it or apologize. I'm not an insecure person like that. I'm saying this now so I can clip it and repost it later so I can say once again that I called it. And like I said, I'm sure the haters will come out just waiting for that opportunity where this guy fucked up, either directly or subtweets. But I do know none of those things will be funny because they've never ever made a funny joke ever in their life. That scoreboard says 0. But this was just a scenario I thought in my head, so keep praying. But as I said, I'm letting myself forget about it. I've become very nonchalant, as the cold open guy says. So this is a ceasefire, sorta. And what I mean by that is there are some conditions to it, and I'll explain. First condition, if I ever hear any shit talk my way again, just know I took it light last episode. That was me being diplomatic. If you want, we could take it outside and I could show you what it's like. I might just boop you on the top of the head. But since I'm more of a hands-off, online tough guy, just know I could do another 20 minutes right now, this instant, all new material. Going much harder, saying everything I didn't say the last time, every story I heard about you guys being dweebs. And because I'm not a grudge holder and I tend to forget this kind of stuff over time, I wrote all that shit down in a notes app. The notes app will come out. I called it the complex doctrine, just so I don't forget. So it's all written down there and I'm letting myself forget it. As Jules says in Pulp Fiction, I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd here. But the other point is, saying fuck that guy or talking shit about me and saying he's doing it for clout is a way to silence criticism. So that's why there's no peace. That's why it's a ceasefire, sort of. It just means there's no violence for now. If I want to be critical of ballsack sneakers or make fun of them, I will. I'm just going to go back to what I was doing before. The same rules apply. I will say ballsack sneakers. I will make some jokes about it. The points will be fair and backed up. They might not like them. I don't give a shit. If it comes back to them, they can be insecure about it. That's on them. And why am I doing this ceasefire only sort of? So that's the second point, because this is the champ's advantage, the people's champ advantage. This is me taking a victory lap. If I call a huge story like the Zeta Kick story, I'm taking my victory lap. I'm sorry. And the last reason, of course, is because fuck them. That's why. Okay, back to what I wanted to talk about is podcast goals for the new year. And first off, this podcast works because you listen and support with the sock drops that I do. Any labor of love requires support or monetization these days. Otherwise, people tend to lose their love for it. So I've always treated the socks kind of like a Patreon instead of having a real Patreon where you're paying just for the content. Here, you're paying me for content, but you get a pair of socks out of it. So I appreciate the people who have bought every single sock. I appreciate the people who have bought one sock a year. If you put those $20 for a sock for a whole year, I think it's worth it. It allows me to keep making this podcast for you. And honestly, it's for me mostly as well too. There's a certain serenity I get from doing this podcast. It allows me to be creative and also allows me to get things off my chest so I don't have to think about them anymore. And so, I talked about my lane earlier. My lane is to create content for sneakerheads, the informed sneakerhead, not the IG or YouTube commenters who don't know me. This only works if you already kind of know my voice from either Twitter or have gone back and listened to the old podcast episodes. The goal has always been to have thoughts and analysis that are accurate but also light and fun. And how I've done it is kind of this 80-20 rule. On Twitter is good for jokes and memes and shit posting. So most of my content on Twitter is jokes. That's why 80% of it is jokes, 20% of it is thoughts and analysis. And then on podcasts, it's the reverse. It's kind of 20% is jokes and 80% is thoughts and analysis, because you can go longer on the podcast than you can on Twitter. And the nature of a solo podcast is just harder to do humor and jokes on here. So the goals for me for this year are more episodes, maybe shorter episodes, but more frequent, more interviews, still mostly a solo podcast. I still like doing the solo ones myself, because getting thoughts and analysis in an interview, you have to kind of dominate the interview, and that's not how I want to approach interviews. So the other goal is to land that big interview, and I'm working on it, and hopefully we can get that achievement unlocked as well before summer. But my main goal is to always keep innovating. You know, the secret to not getting stale is to always have something going on, doing new things, trying to be creative. You know, the people I mentioned earlier, name one new or innovative thing those guys have done in the last 3 years. You know, virtual ballsack con. As Liam Gallagher said, the word is on the street that the fire in their heart is out. So, you know, I said 5 minutes ago, I'd probably shit on them 5 minutes later. Here you go. So to keep innovating, back to the podcast, to keep innovating, the goal is new segments, new podcast themes, more interviews. And I've done some of this already in the past year. Some of the stuff that I did new this last year was doing interviews, which I hadn't done before. I started doing emergency podcasts. I did that one book review episode on sneaker taste, which numbers wise was a top 5 episode. And I was not expecting that. I thought people would probably just find it boring and skip. The haters guide thing was fun. The power rankings, stuff like that. It's all fun. But I will also still keep the traditions. I will still keep the state of the sneaker game, the annual one, the sneaker of the year tournament that I do on Twitter, stuff like that. When it comes to socks, I feel like I've always done something innovative. Early on, I was doing like group buys to cook groups. I thought that was something brand new that people hadn't tried before. But this new format where I drop the password to the site on the podcast really works, because those people who really support me and support the podcast get easy access. It's easy for them. They don't have to be online at a certain time and miss out. And the frequency of once a month works out for me. I have no desire to become like the sock magnet and have 5 or 6 going at the same time. It's just too much. I don't have enough time in the day to handle that. So once a month works perfectly fine for me. I hope it works for you. However, there are some other projects that I've been meaning to do. I've meaning to do a t-shirt, and I think I will get that done this spring or summer. I have another item that I was working on that I just delayed, and I'll probably do that later this year as well too. And not really merch related. I think I will continue to do more coding projects like the Sneaker of the Year bracket generator and things like that. And that's something that I, as a developer, can do that I know others can't. So those are the podcast goals for the year, laying out the foundation. Thank you for listening, and we'll go on with the rest of the sneaker topics today. I wanted to go over some of the results from the Sneaker of the Year bracket that I did on Twitter. As I say every year when I do this, the entire point of it was to fuck around and have fun, to waste people's time. I always say that because people always come at me like, what about this sneaker? What about that sneaker? It should have more GRs in it. Why are there so many Jordans? Why is there New Balance in here? Things like that. And I always say, hey, we're all just wasting some time and having fun. And for that, you're welcome. But really, these types of polls, they're just popularity contests. If anyone wants brand X, New Balance, or Salomon, or whoever to win a popularity contest, then that brand has to make shoes that are fire, and they have to believe it, and they have to get behind it, and then people have to buy it. Easy to say, not easy to do. So if brands could do that, then that shoe would win a popularity contest. Until that happens, you're competing with Jordans and Nikes, and these established sneakers. But really, we're just having some fun before Lost and Found Ones won the whole tournament. So when I make the list, I rank the sneakers of the year from 1 to 64. I don't release that as a list as these are the top 64 sneakers of the year. Maybe I should get into that type of engagement farming, but it's all in the bracket. It's all there. And the way brackets work, everything is distributed. 1 goes against 64, 2 against 63, etc. So it continues on. Most of it, I think I got pretty right. Some I did rank too high, probably like the highs and low A6 1130 or even Tom Sachs GPS. Some I probably ranked too low. Jackie Robinson Dunk, I had a 27. Orange Lobsters, I had a 21. The Travis Phantom, I had way down at 56, but people seem to like it a lot more than that. The Voodoo Zion Jordan 1 Lows, I had it about 17, but people had that in their top 10. And even the Bodega 9060 that came out, I had that in 60th spot, but people said that should be way higher. But that's the beauty of this. It doesn't really matter because voting corrects it anyways. So the final 4 was Lost and Found Ones versus Orange Lobster and Reverse Mocha versus Ama Manier 4. And then the final 2 from that was Lost and Found Ones versus Ama Manier 4 and Lost and Found Ones won. So I feel like those top 4 were the best 4 sneakers of the year for most people. Some other notes from the bracket, I didn't include Panda Dunks. I know there's some discussion about this on Twitter recently. I just figured it's a 2021 shoe, and that's why. There were no Yeezys on the list. Really, not much release other than retros and re-releases. And then, that whole thing happened. A couple of sneakers I forgot about completely, like Midnight Navy Jordan 4. But really, a sneaker like that, put it in spot 40, and it eventually loses in round 1 anyways. Another notable note that happens almost every year is a New Balance shoe doesn't make it past round 3. So like I was saying, if these type of shoes want to win popularity contests, New Balance has made a lot of progress in that, but still only getting to round 3 or 4, at least in my Twitter contest. I'm sure one of these years, New Balance will have a sneaker of the year, and that not only, commentators or reporters think, but also the people think. The other note that I saw when I was making this whole list and as the contest is going was there were a lot of very good sneakers, but not a lot of super fire. I think last year, 2021, had way more super fire. I know I'm using sneaker terms here of very good and super fire and fire, but it's the best way to kind of describe it. So it was not a bad year at all. There were a lot of very good sneakers. That's always a good thing. But when there's a lot of very good ones, it's easy enough to skip a bunch of them and focus on only the ones that you really, really want. I was joking last episode that I should have did the Saki Awards. I didn't have the time to put something like that together. But in terms of my favorites for the year, my favorite retro was the Firebird 3 and the Chlorophyll Trainer 1. The Firebird 3, the quality on that was amazing. It was probably the best retro I've ever seen from Jordan Brand. The best brand, I think, this year, the one that made the most inroads and progress was ASICS for me. The Gel Keanu 14 was a great sneaker. That started in 2021 and continued, and I think we'll have a great year this year as well. That was my most worn sneaker, the Angelo Bach one. The other most worn one I had this year was probably the Highs and Lows A6 1130. So 2 ASICS shoes were my most worn. I have a list of underrated and overrated, and I think people have different definitions of what does underrated mean and what does overrated mean. For some, underrated might mean it should resell for more, or it's a brick. Now, I don't think these should really resell for more. I just think I like them and maybe they weren't appreciated as much as they could have been. The Pink Prime Air Force One Undefeated, the Clerks Pack one, I thought was really good. It's really nice in hand as well too. There was an Air Trainer 1, the SP, the one with the kind of tribal tattoos on it. I thought those were really good. There was a New Balance 550. I'm not even a 550 fan, but I really like that Marquette colorway. There was an Air Force One Carboner with the little Carboner for the swoosh. I thought that was really cool. Even the Dornbecker Air Jordan 5 Low I thought was really good. So those are my picks for underrated. Really, most of the sneakers this year were probably, rated just exactly where they should have been. But for overrated, for me personally, any ALD 550, any ALD sneaker really, I did not really like this last year. Even the orange lobster, it's just an orange dunk. That's just to me, but I understand why people like the lobster heritage and the lobster story. Even the Tom Sachs general purpose shoe I thought was a little bit overrated. Some sneakers that I missed out on this year, I'm totally fine taking an L because I do pretty fine when it comes to sneakers, so I'm not too worried about it. The Military 4 was one that I wanted that I missed out on. This is the type of sneaker that is probably the hardest type of cop for me because there's not going to be an online drop where, there's a domain switch and things like that. And I'm not going to go out to the local stores because really there are very few here in Canada. So these types of drops are always hard for me. The big Jordan release that is very hyped, those are the ones that are hard for me. Like lost and found ones, it was exactly the same. So other ones that I wanted the Le Carte Solomon ACS Pro, the blue to fuchsia ones, the Jao Gel Kano ones, I wanted those as well too. The Casina Air Max 1, I missed out on that. And the Joe Fresh Goods 990 V3, I missed out on that as well too. So my favorite pickups were the Lost and Found Jordan 1, which like I said, I won a Instagram raffle. How crazy is that? If I didn't win that, I would not have that shoe. I probably would not even buy it on GOAT or StockX. Another favorite pickup was the Reverse Mocha Travis 1. Thank you, Travis Scott. And the other favorite pickup was the Taxi Jordan 1. That was a colorway I wanted from the first time those leaked. I think images of that leaked, probably fakes, probably like 2 years ago, and I wanted them ever since. So I'm glad they were easy cops. One of the topics that's been simmering on sneaker Twitter for almost a few months are these videos of these kids buying $300 mystery boxes at SneakerCon, and when they open it, it's just some junk. SneakerCon has been touring around, and I guess one of the vendors there is the one responsible for these mystery boxes. And really, I've seen these being posted on Twitter since like November or so. I even included it on my worst of the year list on Twitter. And I know Oscar PR, a bunch of numbers, that's his @ has been posting them regularly. And then in the last couple of weeks, it was like a different sneaker account was posting the same clip almost every day. And I was joking that, are people taking turns posting the clip today? Or is this the same kid being scammed every day? That'd be hilarious too. Most of the discourse around this thing, I basically ignored for the most part. I didn't feel like wading in that much because it was like obvious. But some of the takes I did see, one of the ones was, the boxes should be of equal value. If you spend $300, you should at least get a $300 shoe back. That doesn't really work for most of these consignment shops because, they're not going to give away a shoe that's worth $300 because they probably paid like $260 for it. That's how it works. They don't pay retail. So what they do is they put their bricks in there, most of their bricks that they want to get rid of. And so it's either stuff that they know is bricks, like the junk camo, whatever Jordan or Dunk it was that they gave away, or stuff that they know is going to brick, like these True Blue ones that they had early. And you can get rid of that now for $300 instead of, later for $210 or whatever. The other one was the parent is to blame. Yes, I guess overall the parent is to blame. Either they gave the money and they're fine with it and the parent's standing right there and, the parent's fine with gambling, their kid gambling, or the parent wasn't there. And honestly, if that was me and I heard that my kid got scammed, I'd just start swinging. And the other one, if the kid is on his own, if the parent said, hey, you're 14 years old, you've saved $300 from working, go have fun at SneakerCon, and he's on their own, the kid is probably thinking, this is really my only chance at orange lobsters. A 13 or 14-year-old's not going to have a credit card. They can't buy online, theoretically. Their sneakers app that their mom or dad has didn't win. The only way to get these kind of orange lobsters now is gambling with the Asian predator here. Someone did ask me in a Twitter reply, hey, is your take going to be just the game is the game? And obviously no. The only reasonable take is don't scam kids, man. It's so blatantly obvious. I don't even need to say it. If you want to scam Hypebeast for $300 and they get pandas or other bricks, that's funny. I'm sorry, that's funny. Post those all day. But kids, I've been posting anti-gambling sneaker stuff when it comes to kids for a while now. I have old tweets about keymasters in consignment shops where kids have won. But the main point, the only reason I have this segment is the guy who's posting all these videos, Chase Briner, I guess his name is, he is bad at grifter marketing. Like, what are you doing? Why are you posting videos of kids? In his response video, he's like, oh, the media is only showing you the bad clips. Why do the bad clips even exist, my guy? You're the one posting them. And then even in the same video, he says it's a gamble. Don't say gamble. Say it's a fun game. Like I said, kids aside, why are you even posting videos of losers? When you got a scam or grift going, you post only the winners. Come play this fun game. You could win. Look at this guy. He won orange lobsters here. Come to SneakerCon. Find us at, Briner Kicks or whatever they're called. And these Travis ones can be yours. And it's TikTok. You can fake this shit all day where your friend pretends to hit I'm on your fours for you. You don't even have to be a good actor. Bad acting is the norm on TikTok. So if this guy was just better at scammer marketing, he wouldn't have gone viral, which means his scam wouldn't have got clipped because SneakerCon is changing the rules. So this is not allowed from what I saw. And you'd keep this grift going. Even if his desire was, I want to continue to scam children. Who is going to be posting these TikToks and how many of them would actually go viral? Instead, it was all from you. It was all from one source. Everyone who saw the first one knew to just follow you. So, I don't know. You just got to get better at scammer marketing if you want to be a scammer. Another topic that bubbles up every few months are knockoff brands. We saw that Nike has slides coming out that look very much like Yeezy slides. John Geiger as well has slides that look like Yeezy slides. And then the SIA guy, the Somewhere in America, Devlin Carter guy, has work boots coming out that look like Timberlands. And this is one of those topics I've mentioned once before that I've changed my mind on over the years. If an independent brand wants to make a knockoff or some sort of inspired by some other shoe, go ahead. Virgil did the same with the LV trainer with Avia and Pony or whatever. It's honestly pretty common in luxury with Steve McQueen and Stan Smith knockoffs. Because I really don't care. It's not my fight. I know Sneaker Fetish has been battling out with the SIA guy about this kind of stuff, about being a hypocrite. And he makes good points, all that stuff. It's just not a fight I want to fight. It's not, I don't care that much about it because I am not the target audience for these shoes. I'm not really into customs at all. I'm not really into knockoff brands that much. Some are, not knockoff brands, but their own original brands like Mosh. Mosh has its Mosh runner. The first one, the Centralia colorway, I thought was really good. But, if I was really into this kind of stuff, I would cop. The closest shoe that I have that falls to this is the John Elliott Edition 1 runner. And that was because it was on sale. But, John Elliott is an established store, retailer. Anyone else who's trying to make some sort of knockoff brand, I would suggest looking at what the Fugazi brand did. They first, got their name out there by making these knockoffs of Paris Dunks, the one with the gun, something shooter they were called. And it was treated kind of like an art project, just like the Ari Menthol 10s were treated like an art project. It had some sort of commentary in there. They made a limited amounts, they weren't making hundreds and thousands. At that point, it's basically a commerce project, not an art project. Can't be a straight rip. Enough has to be different so you don't, get lawyers after you. And that part is subjective. Everyone has different opinions on that. But what Fugazi did was they used that money, used that interest to bootstrap their brand into other things. And now they sell clothes and all kinds of other stuff. Maybe it doesn't get as much buzz as those Paris Dunk knockoffs did, but they're on their own. They're making their own thing. But it honestly doesn't matter what my ideal version of a knockoff brand is because, like I said, I'm not the audience. And that's the key. That's what I want to say with all this. Whether you like these brands or not, whether you like the SIA guy or John Geiger or not, they have an audience. They have built an audience somehow. For John Geiger, when I talk to him, I can totally see why he's got an audience. He was super nice to me in all dealing with him. I totally understand why he connects with athletes and regular people. The Somewhere in America guy, he seems like he's a dick online and embraces that role. There's a lot of people that don't like him, that don't like how he responds to people, but there seems to be a lot of people who do because he does do drops and they sell out and he does pre-orders after that. Both are satisfying the audience that they have. Whether it's, growing or shrinking, I don't know. But if you can build an audience and they fuck with you, they will support you. It's as simple as that. Not to be all Republican about this or anything, but the free hand of the market will decide if these knockoffs or tributes are viable or not. If they're not, they'll stop making them. I've used this quote a lot of times. It's from Peter Drucker, business writer from 80 years ago. He said the purpose of a business is to serve society. If society needs something, society wants something, then a business will be there to create a customer. Whether you like John Geiger or the SIA guy or not, they have built an audience. They have created a customer. And that's that. And there's nothing you can do about it. Well, you can kind of shit on them online. That's what everyone does. Next up, I wanted to talk about Supreme moving to Shopify. When I first heard about this, I had the same reaction as everyone. It's like, wow, that's a huge get. And from what I can tell, it's probably been in the works for a long time. I saw some tweets that maybe, Tremaine Emery hiring him made the big change. It's not that at all. In big companies, some creative director hire that you just hired 3-4 months ago does not make big, huge architectural decisions on systems and vendors. Tremaine is probably arguing with James Jebbia, who wants to make a fuck homework all over print sweater right now. That's what he's probably doing. And JM Wind, Jean-Michel Lemieux, the ex-CTO of Shopify, had some tweets to back it up because he left in April of 2021, and he said that it was basically in the works back then. He said they had to rewrite the checkout. Shopify uses the term flash seller for drops, so Supreme is probably the biggest flash seller in the world. And so if you have a platform that can accommodate that, it has to not crash every week. So it has to be able to keep up. So they probably did the rewrite, they did the checkout, and that Sneaker Trees drop that was, so long ago now was probably the first version of what you're seeing now. And sure enough, a few days later, they announced that there's this new commerce components-based platform for retailers that want a highly customized version of Shopify. Right now, if you sign up for Shopify, you get, a theme for your store, and then the checkout is basically the same for every single site. And so this kind of rips that all apart. And an existing site can take pieces of what they want from Shopify. So they can say, take the cart and the checkout and nothing else. And when a news post like this goes out, it's the last thing that happens, not the first thing. They've probably been working on this for over a year. And then at the very end, you release the news release. So this component-based thing just lets Supreme chop and screw the site how they want. They can say, we want to keep the Supreme experience. That's what I'm going to call Supreme, keeping their site the same. But we're going to use your cart and we're going to use your checkout on the back end. Maybe we'll use a queue, maybe we won't. I'll get to that in a little bit. But in terms of how they landed it, I'm guessing this is how it went. This is how usual big deals happen at tech companies. Shopify probably pitched to Supreme, hey, that we have a new suite that we can support kind of what you want. We can support the Supreme experience. Supreme is probably skeptical, but, open to listening. Then Shopify probably prepared a demo, made a quick version of their site and showed them, hey, look, here's the Supreme experience. Everything's exactly the same. And then they had to show off metrics that they could handle high volume drops, show them that they'll probably save money. Maybe a few rounds of that back and forth, a demo here, a demo there. A deal was done, and then they started to work on the real version. And so that would mean that Splay, the Supreme developer, is no longer in the picture. I'm assuming. I don't know. Finally, they worked on this. They have some sort of release date. They have a release plan. You have a release manager. Somewhere along the way, they bought the supreme.com URL. Now they can have both sites up at the same time. They can have the Splay version as a fallback, and then they can have the new Shopify version on supreme.com. So the big question is, how will drops go now? The last week 17 or 18, whatever it was, of the last season for Supreme wasn't exactly an ideal week that kind of showed you what it was going to be like. Not much drops, so it's not exactly a great test. Didn't have to worry about stopping bots, and nothing seemed to be hype enough that would trigger a queue from what I could tell. Everything was basically the same. I noticed when you went to checkout, there was an H CAPTCHA, and then later on in the day, it turned to regular Google CAPTCHA. And then you saw a spinner for a second, and then you got the checkout page. They did not have Apple Pay on there yet. That was the other big difference. So 2 points. The first one is, for manual, is everyone just going to be stuck in a queue? Am I going to add the box logo size XL to cart? The queue says 8 minutes, and then it says sold out. Now when I go back to the page and try to cart a size large instead, Is it going to kick me back into the queue and now the queue's going to say, 24 minutes now? If I was Supreme, honestly, I would say we don't want a queue. If I was James Jebbia, I would say a queue is not part of the Supreme experience. The Supreme experience is the race to checkout. So that is my bold prediction. I could be wrong. I don't know. I haven't confirmed this. But my bold prediction is there will not be a queue on the Supreme site. Either I'll clip this and say, hey, look, I was a genius, or I will never mention it again. So that leads to the other point. Is every drop going to be botted? Right now, bots are not really bothering with Supreme that much. They're going to show up for BOGOs or some hype accessory or something, but everything else, not really. When that sneaker trees drop happened and it was all like GraphQL based and stuff, bots didn't work because it was completely different than anything they had seen. So I'm sure it'll be the same this time. If on the upcoming season, on week 1, something hype is dropping, I'm sure we'll see something we haven't seen before when it comes to anti-bot protection. And it just ushers in a new era of this cat and mouse game. Everyone just thinks it's going to be exactly like the Orange Lobster drop and bots are going to clean up. But, I wouldn't go into a new battle with old guns that failed on Orange Lobster drop. Honestly, if I was a bot developer on Wrath or whatever, as soon as I saw this announcement, I would have blocked off time for coding because you now have to decrypt whatever new is coming. But that's the other thing with anti-bot. One, I don't think we're going to have a new domain every single week like we do for sites like Alma Manier or Concepts. They'll probably still have HCAPTCHA. They'll probably still have drawing a box around a plane or a cat. Maybe there'll be a question, but there might be something entirely new. And as we know with Supreme, it could either be dialed up or dialed down or just turned off, because most weeks they probably won't need it at all. One of the conspiracy theories I saw that why did Supreme make the switch was they did it to keep resale high, meaning bots will take all the stock, therefore the resale prices of items will go up because regular people did not get them. When it comes to Supreme, how the item looks and how much stock there is what determines resale. With VF Corp being the owner and more stores opening, new ones in Chicago and LA, stock is not going down, stock is going up. They're not going to make big corporate decisions based on keeping resale market price up to drive hype. I think that if you presented a slide to Supreme saying the solution is we move to Shopify and it will keep resale high, you'd be laughed out of the room. So honestly, if I was in there and I was pitching, I was the salesman trying to sell Shopify to Supreme, I'd be saying, look, you'd save money, because that's what matters in business. Supreme as a site was very unique in that it was one of the only stores that didn't use some sort of e-commerce solution. They had their own custom implementation. They controlled the entire checkout flow. They could do whatever they wanted and didn't affect anyone else. Shopify or Demandware could not build in custom stuff for one merchant. They would have to build stuff for a platform for most merchants or most stores. So I don't know if Supreme was just doing everything on their own. Like, were they doing credit card processing? What if the credit card companies came to them and say, hey, our rate is now 6% and Shopify's rate is 2.9%. That'd be enough right there to consider switching. Again, Supreme is a very secretive company. They're not going to talk about this kind of stuff. So this is just my guess. And credit card processing is not exactly my lane either. The other question is, how much were they paying Splay as their developers to maintain and update versus paying Shopify? If I was Shopify, I would say, look, here's our rate. Here's what it would cost you. And if the number that they showed, the estimate, the Supreme developer was probably like, well, we pay way more to Splay per month than that number. If that difference is huge, it's enough to consider switching. And Splay, they were pretty good at stopping bots when they wanted to. But like I said, Supreme didn't always want to. Sometimes you saw drops where bots just cleaned up. Honestly, can't tell if it was deliberate or if anti-bot just didn't work that time. There's a couple times where I saw where it worked fine on mobile and didn't work at all on desktop, or the reverse. The bot developers probably know the difference of when it was deliberate and it worked or when they had it turned off. So I'm saying if Supreme realized that, why are we paying Splay when we don't need them most of the time? Stock is higher now. We can save so much more money going to Shopify. We can just kind of give up all that And this is one of the points I brought up earlier in a previous podcast is when you're a company and you have a site or an app, you're essentially a tech company. And Supreme was basically a tech company having this custom solution and an app that they have to maintain and have to develop and have to keep up to date with anti-bot technology. There's a risk in having a small company like Splay being a huge part of your company, since Supreme does not seem to own Splay, but is reliant on them and their talent. What if Splay loses their anti-bot team, or, the main people there get poached? Or, as simple as, what if the premium level that Splay has is not required anymore, and we can just use pretty good level from Shopify? Because there's less risk in hiring a big industry giant that's proven to them that they can handle their weekly drops. I'm assuming they proved that to them with this new component-based thing. Whereas dealing with Splay, dealing with credit card companies, dealing with new stores in different countries, you're dealing with different rules per country. What if Shopify just said, we can do all that for you? That's a huge part for VF Corp and growth is new stores, new countries. If Supreme wants to open a store in Canada and work is already done by Shopify to support Canadian currency, whereas Splay has to write all that code from scratch. So by offloading this all to an industry leader like Shopify, Supreme can focus on being a streetwear company and the work that Tremaine Emery is doing, putting, fuck homework all over print on a sweater, instead of being a tech company, but still have ultimate control on the Supreme experience. I wanted to talk about round 2 and consignment shops closing. So there's been a couple notable closures recently. Cookies and Kicks in LA closed down recently, and round 2 as well. The Virginia location seems to not have opened after COVID. The LA one closed a couple months ago, and then it seems like the New York City one quietly closed down as well too. And I was thinking about this and that round 2 had basically pioneered the formula of success for consignment shops that other consignment shops are now following. And the key to this for them was their YouTube series. When they were regularly doing their YouTube show, Sean Wotherspoon would be front and center. Other people who worked there would be on there. You got to know the characters. You got to see the types of shoes and vintage clothing they had. And it basically promoted their consignment shop to the point that where Sean Wotherspoon got onto the, design your Nike shoe, and he and a group of friends ended up designing an iconic shoe. So what went wrong? How did it go from, having an iconic shoe, having multiple locations, to basically shutting down? I know there's a lot going on right now with the economy, with inflation and recession and people's spending power. And, maybe consignment shop buyers are realizing that maybe it really is cheaper on StockX. Maybe there are other problems. Maybe, Sean Wotherspoon is busy doing other stuff, dropping a bunch of mid shoes with Adidas. That probably didn't exactly help either. There's a new podcast called Store Credit, and it has a bunch of ex-employees of round 2. And in one of the episodes, they were telling a story about how a lot of the employees there were often buying sneakers from round 2, usually the lesser known ones, not the highly demanded ones. And they would buy those ones for under market and go drop off at Flight Club, and they would make more money. So it's not exactly a sustainable business when your employees are some of your best customers. But to me, the downfall started when they stopped doing their YouTube show. And I don't know why they did that. Personality issues, whatever it was, time, costs, could have been anything. But that was a key part of the formula round 2 had pioneered. It got their name out there. It got Sean Wotherspoon's name out there. It's what got them a shoe. It became a travel destination for people. If you're in LA, go to round 2, go to Riff, go to Flight Club. It was in that mix. And not only for people who watch the YouTube show, but people who just follow along to these posts on sneaker accounts. And you see that this formula is now being adapted by a lot of consignment shops who are posting podcasts and posting videos on YouTube, and they're finding success with it. They can create the short form content with TikToks and stuff like that, or the long form content on both YouTube and podcasts. Some examples, there's Common Hype in Arizona. Sneak City in Seattle, Private Selection in Dallas. Private Selection also has been leaking a lot of stuff early. That helps to get their name out there. But, those three that I named, I don't even watch sneaker YouTube regularly. So if I, got to Phoenix, I'd be like, hey, let me check out Comment Hype. In terms of these podcasts, there's a lot of these sneaker consignment shop podcasts popping up. Private Selection has one. The store credit one that I mentioned, that is run by a bunch of guys who either own or operate Syndicate LA. Personally, I think they should have kept Syndicate LA in the name and not Store Credit, but Store Credit is a good name. So really, at the end of the day, the point of the pod is to promote your store. And making compelling YouTube content is a bit different than making compelling podcast content. In YouTube, what works is video and footage of what you have, the buyouts that you did, what happened at SneakerCon, this guy who tried to sell you a fake and you filmed it. Versus on podcasts, it's probably more about interviews and stories. Here's a story about a guy who once tried to sell us a fake. I'm telling the story. I don't have footage of it. But take it from me, creating content is not easy. And like I said earlier, it's really easy to get stale. It's really hard to innovate and try new things. But whatever they do, they should keep trying to create compelling content, keep trying to make a connection, keep trying to get their name out there. But all they have to remember is what happened to round 2 when they stopped. Somewhat related, I was thinking about old sneakers and sneaker history lately. And this started when SNKRS app had this poll with various Air Force Ones going up against each other in a bracket with voting on it. And I saw a lot of people posting a lot of tweets upset about how Grails were losing to some GR or to some lesser known Grails. People were tweeting the disrespect, how this is upsetting, why did this happen? The Taiwan Air Force One lost to some New York City pack that just came out 2 years ago. Or Linens lost to the Year of the Boomerang Air Force One. And, even that I just made up. There is no Year of the Boomerang Air Force One. That's a Rage Against the Machine song. Having personally done a sneakers bracket, I know that it's all just a popularity contest, that people now are voting for what they like the most and how the shoe looks now, and probably not by the story or the history of the shoe. So, how do we change that? How do we get people to know the story of the Taiwan Air Force One? How do we get it to the point where it wins a poll on the SNKRS app? How do you impart sneaker history onto the next generation? Really, it's always going to be self-driven. People who want to know history will seek it out and learn it. And that's what I was thinking about, is how will they learn it? What content is there to learn this kind of stuff? And the question is, who are the stewards of sneaker history? Who are the people that will create this type of content? Number one, of course, are the brands. They have the most control in that they can actually retro the shoe and retell the story on an 18 to 24 month cycle. Otherwise, other than that, they can create SNKRS app articles or galleries and polls like they did. But even that, as I've talked about on this podcast before, they're not doing as much storytelling as they once were. They have the metrics on all those SNKRS app galleries that they do behind the shoe. Which ones get more view? Would a Travis Scott one get more view than the retelling of the Taiwan Air Force One? Probably. Other people are publishers. These are people who create books, magazines, websites, people like Complex, people like Sneaker Freaker, things like that. I'll talk about them in a little bit. There's also the celebrity collectors that we all know, people who actually have these shoes, the Fat Joes, the Mayor, Perfect Pair, DJ Clark Kent, those types. And those are the people that Complex and others will go to, film something for their Sneaker of the Year panel, because those are the names that people know. And that's why they're not going to have, some no-name person from Twitter join their panel. The rest of the people who do this kind of stuff are just the enthusiasts who do it for the love of the game. Regular people creating content do it because they love it. These are YouTube, podcasts, Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts, whatever. On Instagram, I know there's several accounts like Sneaker Preservation Society, Archive DNA, Nike Stories was an older one. I was actually talking to the guy who ran it. His name is Drew Hamill. And Nike basically got that account shut down because it had the name Nike in it. So Nike probably thought people are going to think this is official, but it's not. So let's shut this guy down. Even Archive DNA, I think it used to be called Nike DNA or something like that before they were forced to change their name. So even if you're an enthusiast and want to share your history of sneakers, you got to keep it clean and beware of lawyers. So those are the players. So how do those people, educate the next generation about, say, the Terror Squad Air Force Ones, which are supposedly coming back this year? Someone born in 2003 might think the TS on the heel of those shoes stands for Travis Scott. If you were born in 2003, name 3 members of the Terror Squad. I could probably name 3. It's Fat Joe, Big Pun, Remy Ma, DJ Khaled, of course. There's a few. Cuban Link. So who's going to tell the story of that sneaker, of what's involved there? Of course, it's going to be someone like Fat Joe or DJ Khaled. But the significance of that shoe is lost every year that shoe did not release. So every year there's fewer and fewer people who know about that shoe because there's more and more newer and younger sneakerheads coming into the game. And who's going to talk about it? There's a Simpsons clip where Milhouse says, "Hey everybody, an old man is talking. Let's go listen." That does not happen because it's just not easy to make content about sneaker history compared to other fields like music or movies. You can revisit history of those easily because it's easy to consume an old movie or an old album. It's not easy to consume old sneakers. You either got to wait for the retro, hunt for it on eBay, or listen to DJ Clark Kent talk about it once a year if he's not talking about his, clean white Air Force Ones. So not only is there a problem of an old man telling a story, there is a problem of what is there a market for. Say I wanted to write a book about music, and say I'm really interested about freestyle 80s. And I'm not talking about freestyle rap. I'm talking about, Lisa and the Cult Jam and Stevie B and stuff like that. Or I could write a book about grunge music in the 90s. Of course, you could write a book about, freestyle 80s, about Expose and Cynthia and bands like that as a labor of love. But which book would sell better? Of course, the grunge one, because those are the people who are becoming boomers now, people like me, who would most likely buy a book like that. Which has more fans? Which has more of a built-in market? And this is how publishers think about content. To them, if it's not going to make money, it's not worth doing. They're not going to lose money for the love of the game. Bringing it back to content and podcasts and things like that. I think about podcasts just because I do a podcast, but would someone like, say, DJ Clark Kent start a podcast about sneaker history, telling sneaker stories? As I said, a celeb collector like that has kind of a pre-built audience. So it would be a little bit ahead of the game versus an enthusiast. Would you listen to it? Would you listen to a podcast like that? Some of you are probably listening right now saying, yes, that'd be great. Others are probably saying, hell no. Because there is that divide between old heads and kids, and how can you relate to one or the other or both? And then it's about making money, and is it worth it to do? For someone like, say, Fat Joe or Wale, is it even worth their time? They can probably make more money in less time on a gig somewhere. So if there was an easy way to do this where you could make money, where kids listened, we'd be seeing these podcasts springing up left and right all the time, the way these Consignment Shop podcasts are. But there's no easy path to monetize content about sneaker history. There's no country for old heads. This has been episode 47 of the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, go fuck yourself.